just so I
Yeah, it's
don't
cool.
forget. What
That's
did you
right.
want to talk about again today?
Well, you mentioned about the Garden of Eden, and also about adding in the watches with it, and some Gnostic elements and stuff in. What I've been writing down. I took a whole bunch of notes, so I wanted to mention where the watches come from, the name, and the serpent in the garden being seraphim, like one of the
Yeah,
angels, possibly.
that's from yeah.
So stuff like that, man. Like I just thought heaps different, and about the watchers sharing forbidden knowledge like architecture and makeup and shit like that.
Metallurgy,
Yeah,
weapons, stuff like
yeah,
that.
all that sort of stuff. So I thought you'd have a lot of fun with this subject too, and I thought we could mention aliens or whatever, and we can mention everything in this subject, bro. It's a really open subject you picked, which is fucking cool.
We got some things we're gonna talk about today. That's good. So let's start with the Garden of Eden because talked about that earlier. I did that YouTube video with this guy named Enigma Seeker. He's on Twitter, and he has a lot of great information, man. It was interesting to uh get his ideas from his research on where the Garden of Eden is. So I wanted to ask you, from your understanding, where is the Garden of Eden at?
Well, if you go by mythological stories, somewhere in the Middle East, really. Otherwise, if you go by, say, well, obviously it didn't actually happen. If you want to go by, say, if it did historically, I guess Africa, as life began out of Africa. But Mesopotamia, for instance, had the first mention of the garden. So it would be somewhere in the Samaria. Then you also had the Babylonian High Gardens, or whatever it was called, Hagen Gardens, I think it was,
Right, right.
whichever it was called. So
Mm-hmm.
most likely based on a bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing I want to mention too, which I found interesting, is the whole story of the Christians killing serpents or St. Patrick killing the serpents and all that sort of stuff in Ireland. All that story actually derives from the killing of the Gnostics and, say, the Druids, the wisdom of the old serpent wisdom, basically. So, like Kundalini's, chakras, Kabbalah, and all this sort of stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
found that really, really interesting. Not many
Right,
people talk about that either.
right. Yeah,
But
'cause,
also, sorry, Ty, you,
no,
you
no, go ahead,
continue.
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to mention also with the Garden of Eden story, when you go with the Gnostic elements, say from the Apocalypse of Adam, or even the Holy Book of the Visible Spirit, God and his angels aren't what they seem they are. They're more demonic, and Adam and Eve are made to serve out of fear and in slavery,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're created as one being originally, but it was because this arrogant, evil God, according to this Gnostic text, wanted to create man, which is God in the spirit form that he's seen a reflection of in the waters. But he made this lifeless being, breathes life into Adam, basically, and gives a bit of his power. So he splits Adam into two, Adam and Eve, and basically trapping human souls to keep serving him in fear and slavery, basically, which is pretty interesting.
And this
Similar to
is
like the fallen angels.
the Gnostic, uh,
Yes.
Christian Gnostic, or is it?
Yes. Christian
Okay,
Gnostic, this would be.
okay,
Yes.
right, right, right. Okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, because see, when I have different ideas of where the Garden of Eden is because I have read different books of where it could be at. I mean, I've read anywhere from South Africa to, like you said, Mesopotamia, Egypt. Some people who haven't who even included the Americas, North America in
Yep.
particular. You know, it's interesting because there is, I'm not going to say absolute evidence because there's no absolute evidence when it comes to showing where the garden even Eden is. Everybody has enough evidence to claim where they believe the garden of Eden is, so when I read about the Garden of Eden, from what I understand, is that it's basically a location somewhere on Earth, or many locations on this Earth,
Also, spirit realm.
or spirit realm, yeah, that was where gods and humans can interact. And in many ways, if as long as you lived in the Garden of Eden as a human, you was to live forever, I guess. I mean, that's
Basically.
basically right. Okay, because I'm just trying to make sure I understand it correctly because some there's so, like I said, there's so many ideas, but that's basically the
Yes.
foundation that I understand of it.
And
And
then
I,
you also had the Sumerian version where humans could procreate, and then you had the Garden of Eden story where it wasn't meant to be like that. It was meant to be just Adam and Eve serving God. That's where you had the fallen angels coming down to earth as they want to have sex, as sex was forbidden in heaven, procreation forbidden in heaven in a sense. But even the Watchers, that comes from the Greek word Grigori, which is a Greek transliteration of a Grigori, which means those who are awake in guard. So this being said, that gives a whole new meaning to the word. So these people sharing knowledge such as fire, metallurgy, teaching women how to apply makeup, and agriculture. This is just knowledge, basically, that they were condemned to death for. Basically, it's similar to the Greek story with sharing the knowledge of fire, and then the crows pick out his eyes, and they return each day and they pick out his liver and stuff as punishment from Zeus. So it's pretty interesting. We have these sort of stories.
right, right.
And we also have the stories in Gnosticism with Yao the Bayoff in the Apocalypse of Adam, apparently having three sons, which is Yao, Eloi, and Astiphios. And apparently, a wise instructor, which could be Jesus, is instructing Adam and Eve to eat the fruit, and they realize their nakedness and they see their beastly creators. And it's interesting when it mentions beastly, because if you look at old gods, they were half animal, half humans,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's throughout multiple
And
different
that's the
cultures.
Gnostic version, right? Because
Yes, that's the Gnostic
you
version.
know,
Yes.
it's so crazy because I can't remember where I just heard this from, but I was watching something and it brought up angels. When you get the depiction of angels using the many different ideas from, from all religious aspects, these
It's scary
angels
looking.
exactly, like if you was to see one, it would be something that frightens you. But when you read the Holy Bible, they were messengers. They were people
Hmm.
who gave messages, or not people, they were individuals who gave people messages from whatever, from the
And they're
Elohim
always
they,
afraid.
yeah. And when you see these angels, in movies and stuff like that, they have wings usually,
Hmm.
but they don't ever depict the actual,
No.
um,
I don't believe they have
what,
ever once in film. Oh, once actually on the Pinocchio cartoon, they did. And that was pretty interesting. Just the first bit of it, then it opens up its wings and you can see a person. But besides that, the actual form, you see the eyes and the wings and stuff, which is really,
yeah,
really
that's what I
cool.
say. Like most of
Yeah.
the ideas that I know from what an actual angel looks like from the old, ideas is that they had many eyes, you know.
Yep. I'm also glad you mentioned the angels because there's a story about Lucifer, or I should say Satan, sorry, two different beings. Satan, or even the serpent in the garden, being a seraphim. So the serpent in the garden being the wisest of God's creations, the seraphim being punished with the serpent form. As if you see the scene in Exodus, I think it was, with Moses making the statue for the people to worship after being bitten by poisonous snakes. It's a snake, and it's represented by well, its name, Burning Ones,
Mm-hmm.
which is
I've
pretty
heard
much
that before.
also,
Burning ones. I've heard
yeah,
that
it's
before.
also referred to with the seraphim, which were like six winged angels with the eyes on. I'm pretty sure that was a particular one. I also want to mention something else with the name of the fallen angel, because I've been looking at some of the ancient language. The name Samyaza actually means gazes at the heavens or from the heavens as well, which I also found interesting. So this goes back into these ideas of awakened. So one's sharing knowledge. So really, they're not really evil. Even with the serpent in the garden, it's telling the truth, and that's why reason it's mentioned as the wisest of all creatures. So it's punished essentially for telling the truth, which is quite interesting. So this God in the Bible is not really a God. And then when you got the Sumerians, even they get jealous and they get fearful of us that we're procreating so much. So you have this
Right.
idea of God's being jealous of us and having to separate us from eternity and knowledge, as if we live forever and have all this knowledge, we're basically more powerful than them, you know, or
Right.
on their equal level.
See,
So you have this fear.
you mentioned earlier, Lucifer, Satan. I liked how you said that they're two different people because a lot of people
Yep,
believe they are actually the same. Um,
I know.
I've read it so many different ways, but uh, you know, the first, because you also mentioned the fallen angels. The first fallen angel was, who do you consider him? What do you call him? Satan, the devil, Lucifer? I mean, who was the first fallen angel? Because
Well, some people say Lucifer, and some people say that name I just mentioned, Elisa, Samyaza. which means gazers from heavens or gazers
But that's
at
from the
heaven.
Book of Enoch. I mean,
Enoch, yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you have, say, Gnostics that fallen angels are essentially us, and
Mm.
essentially that we're stuck in a material world and trying to return to the source, return home, energy, one with God again. Or you have the sense of, say, the Elohim being the fallen angels and they were the gods of old.
Yeah,
So it's, yeah, all up to interpretation, really, of oneself, of how you see the stories.
yeah. And see, the reason why I said that was because when we go back to let's go back to the Garden of Eden. Um, the Satan, we'll just say Satan, uh, got Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. Now we talked about the forbidden fruit in the past. I talked about the Sumerian cuneiform tablets or the Mesopotamian. I shouldn't say Sumerian, but the Mesopotamian tablets that actually say what it was that the forbidden fruit was. And I told you from Anton Parks, his book Eden, he talks about how Enki gave metallurgy
Hmm.
to humankind, and metallurgy is basically the beginning of agriculture. And good and evil is the agricultural part, being able to sustain ourselves by creating, and or not just creating but harvesting grain and stuff like that. And then the evil part of it is by the destructive weapons that we have, the bullets, knives, swords,
Yeah.
all the things that can take somebody's life away. And you know is it a bad thing? Because you said, earlier, we talked about good and evil. Is it a bad thing that somebody taught us how to do agriculture and that later on taught us how to create a weapon to shoot a bullet or, a nuclear weapon? I mean, where will we be without the idea of knowing how to create agriculture, how to sustain
Hmm.
ourselves by that?
Well, I don't think there'd be too much like wrong with it because ideas can lead to all sorts. We have to fuck up in order to find out what's right. But another thing is, we're making weapons way before agriculture. We were hunters and gatherers and stuff, you know.
Man, I'm
So
glad you said
there's
that.
also
Yep.
that, you know.
Yeah, because I'm reading a book right now called Forbidden Archaeology, and they talk about bolas and spearheads and different types of weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, of course we were. I mean, there's obviously some type of war that was with the Neanderthals and the Homo
Yep.
sapiens.
Yeah, man. Like all different species were all fighting each other, also intermingling too. You know, it wasn't all just as barbarian as some people like to say. Like, and it
Yeah, I
wasn't all
mean,
just cherry
it's
and
always
loving like
yeah,
some people like to say either. You know, it was like
yeah.
fucking middle ground. You know, so it's interesting. Like humans have been
That's
as
why we got
smart
so
as what
many
they were
different
back
looking
then.
people today.
Yeah, 100%.
Everybody's
Like
mixed
back
up.
then, intelligent people, like such as us, we were philosophers and medicine men back then. You know, like people were just as intelligent. Like some people believed all the myths and all that 100% like religion today. Some didn't. You know, even Greek philosophers didn't believe all the stories and they seen that some of these traits were too petty to be gods and they were just human ideas, you know, which is pretty cool. But
Somebody was
also, sorry.
no, go
I
ahead,
was
go
going to
ahead,
mention
no,
something
go
about
ahead,
the
go, go
cave
ahead, go,
paintings.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Like, I was baffled to see cave paintings with us riding horses, hunting mammoths. Have you seen any of that, Tyrone?
Yeah, I know mammoths were around all the way up until maybe just maybe about 3 or 4, maybe 5, 6,000 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah, man, they survived up to the Egyptian times, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Last one was found there in Egypt or something like that,
yeah,
from what I
something
remember.
like that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I read that so many different articles. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that reading that book, Forbidden Archaeology, has taught me a lot because you know we always talk about what is a human, what is a human. I can ask you what is your idea of a human, you'll give me your idea, and I'll have one, and 10 other people will have one. And I know in the book it always talks about anatomically human, so I'm guessing that's more like the shape of how we look, basically. And
Yeah, the
you can
upright form.
yeah, and you can tell, even though um we if you line 10 different people up, you're going to get 10 different ways of people looking. And depending on their environment, the food they eat, the health, and all that other stuff contributes to how they look.
Yes.
um we 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 were in the Bible, it says we were created in God's image. So I always wanted to know what exactly God looked like. Everybody wants to know that, whether you believe in God or not. At one point in your life, that question always popped in your head. What does God look like?
100%.
Because you can't be an atheist and not question that. You know why?
Well, the
Because
original idea of it was man and woman, so it's meant to be both traits,
yeah,
so yeah,
androgynous. I think
androgynous.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And then from there, it start to remove the feminine side, and then we had the full on masculine side.
masculine
That's why we
side,
have
yeah.
people think of God as this whole dude with the beard, or Morgan Freeman,
Yeah,
you know?
that's absolutely true. Women, if they were looked at, on a high standard, they had to have, some type of,
Yeah,
beard. I mean, I
the
did read
Pharaohs
that,
used to use it.
but I always wanted to know what God looked like. We always want to know, right? And I was telling you earlier, I'm writing an article on melanin, right? Because throughout, for some reason, um, color seems to be something that everybody discusses, right? No matter what it is, we got our Gnostic views, we got our personal views, we got our religious views, we have whatever. And you talked about the Watchers, right? You talked about the fallen Watchers, right? Um, and before we even started recording, I think we talked about, you said you wanted to bring a little bit of aliens into it, right? So let's put that in perspective, right? Aliens. We know right now in our solar system, or at least in what we know as what's around us right now, we know that we orbit our sun, right? And there are certain other planets out there, depending on if you believe Pluto is a planet or not. There are a certain amount of number of planets that go around orbit the sun with Earth, right? We know right now that there is no other planet around us that can hold life like us, right? An alien form of what any science fiction anybody might think of, or whatever religious idea that you have of what God or gods or the Elohim may look like. If we put something out there, aliens out there, they're not close enough to our sun. So what would they look like? Because for one, they wouldn't be close to our sun, right? They wouldn't
They
be
have their
able,
own sun too.
right? The gravity, what kind of gravity they have, all that
Mm.
stuff plays a major part in,
Yes,
how they look, right? And
100%.
um if they created us, right? Why would they create us so small? Like it's amazing, because no matter what religious text you read, or myth that you read, the gods created humans to do something for them. Basically, toil the earth,
Yep,
be their, the people that brought them food and cooked their food, and no matter what, they needed us, right,
yep,
to do their things. And
absolutely
most of
right.
the time, these individuals were tall and big giants, right? Why would they make something so much smaller than them? And the amount of stuff that we can do for them would be in a smaller amount, rather than something,
Yep.
you know,
Also, what make us so far away?
yeah, or make us so far away from where they actually need it. Because there's so many ideas on why they came here, right? And I know, and I truly believe in aliens and stuff like that, but it does talk about in the text something from up above came down. They were watchers, no matter whether you call them watchers, extraterrestrials, aliens, gods. I don't care what word you were. Something from up above came down, right? They came down and brought us um knowledge, right? Now, in the religious aspect of things, something came from above and gave us knowledge, and they were called watchers, angels, um, gods,
I have another
extraterrestrials,
thing I'd like to
aliens.
add to this as well, Tyrone,
What's that?
and that is with, say, if it is angels, who's to say that they didn't just come here, want to know that there's other consciousness out there, and then simply left, and we took it for much more. Who knows
Yeah,
as well.
but see, that's the thing. There's so many theories, but I don't. I know about the Gnostic ideas and theories. There's so many different ones, just because
Yes.
Gnostics. I can never say that word right for some reason. That world is it's a personal belief, basically, based off personal experience, I guess.
Yes.
That's what I get so far from talking to many people who follow that, including you, right?
Mm.
And I when if I read the Holy Bible, they were angels. Now, in the Holy Bible, it says that there were a certain amount of angels that came with Satan, or whoever you want to consider him as, right? Came down with him. I've read anywhere from 50 to a couple of hundred, right? Depending on what traditional myth, oral story you follow or read, the number changes. And I we when we talked about the Garden of Eden, there was that's on planet Earth, right? And that means that these individuals, including us, that's a place where we can interact with one another. These individuals, these angels and gods, or whatever you want to call them, can die, right? Like they don't have a lifespan. They do live for thousands of years, depending on what text you read, but they can die, right?
Yes. Well, something funny you mentioned is there are a few Gnostics that believe that Jesus' crucifixion was actually him swapping places with this old God of the Bible and getting rid of these old sacrificing gods. Not all believe this as a different type, but I also found that a little bit interesting as well.
Tell me about that.
Hmm. Well, the idea of that one was with Jesus saying, "Oh, why have you forsaken me?" or everything. That's pretty much Yahweh saying it's pretty much about forsaking him. Pretty much so, trading places. Then you have the idea of even Jesus trading places with Judas Iscariot and
Mm-hmm.
the person who was carrying the cross. I've got his name now, but I think it might be Simon. To be honest, I think it was Simon that was carrying his cross. But yeah, many different types of Gnosticism, man. There are also many different branches of Christianity, as you know, from Arianism that believed Jesus was a spirit. You also had the idea of Jesus Gnosticism just hating the gods in general, and that the 12 disciples were the 12 archons, and him being replacing the Yada off, killing it off, getting rid of it since God's no longer around. But that belief still lingers to this day, actually, which is quite surprising. Um, Not very popular opinion though, but it's an ancient one still,
That's
which is
crazy.
pretty interesting. Yeah,
So, so I just typed this into to um to AI chat, and I says, "Let me ask you, do you believe in Jesus as a
I
Christian
believe
Gnostic?"
a historical figure figured. Well, not his name wasn't Jesus, of course. We
Mm,
don't really know his name. I'd say Yeshu or Yeshua,
mm,
but I see an esoteric mystic man, an Essene, which was a Gnostic way of thinking, because Gnosticism is found in Judaism. The idea of the eternal soul or us carrying the divine spark is found in Judaism. That is Gnostic.
mm.
So Jesus would have
What,
been
what
what
what's Gnostic exactly when you said that?
well, spiritual knowledge, esoteric
Okay,
knowledge, basically, secret knowledge. So
so
it's
esoteric knowledge
yeah, or
is
spiritual knowledge, gnosis. So it's also a Greek
is
word for knowledge, but specifically spiritual knowledge, knowledge from within oneself.
spiritual knowledge is Gnostics. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
yes,
Okay. All right. Okay. Because I typed in I typed in GP in AI chat, because I told you this is some of the things that I think you should get into, right? And I
yep,
type in, does not the Gnostics believe in Jesus? And it says Gnostics have varying beliefs about Jesus. Some Gnostics
yes,
identify Jesus as an embodiment of the supreme being who became incarnate to bring gnosis to the
yep,
earth,
gnosis.
while or gnosis. I
Yep,
keep
doesn't
messing that
matter.
up for some.
Gnosis and gnosis is fine.
Yeah, I heard it so many different ways.
Hmm.
To the earth, while others adamantly denied that the supreme being came in the flesh, claiming Jesus to be merely a human who attained enlightenment
Yep.
through a gnosis and taught his disciples to do the same.
Yeah, there are also
Mm.
Gnostics that believe Jesus was a myth. They probably wouldn't say it there, but that's the
Yeah,
case.
but that goes with
And
the
yeah,
varying beliefs about Jesus.
yes, yes.
Mm.
Like some even believed he was a mushroom, you know, or a spirit inside the mushroom, I should say, actually,
Oh, I want to
technically, to
type
be
that in
accurate.
there. I want to type that in there.
Yeah.
Does Gnostics believe in what was it that
Jesus
Jesus?
is inside the magic mushroom. There's a Mexican cult to this
Mm.
day that still holds onto that belief, which is interesting. And this particular theory goes into this is one reason the Romans were destroying the magic mushrooms. They were destroying magic mushrooms because Christians were taking them, but this is one reason they said, and this is one reason they were trying to hide who Christ really was through secret rituals and mysteries, which the early Christians were into. It was very, very much Gnostic, but Gnosticism is very old. It goes back to Epidemius in
Mm.
ancient Greek and other mystery schools within Mesopotamia, Egypt, and even Persia. So
So
it's
let me
yeah,
get this
it's
straight. You
spiritual
said
knowledge basically.
because I'm telling you, man, this is good because okay, so here it goes. There is a theory proposed by John Marco Allegro in his book The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross that Jesus never existed as a historical figure but was rather a mythological creation of early Christians under the influence of psychoactive mushroom extracts such as I don't even know how to say it psilocybin. And it says, however, this theory has been subject to ridicule and scorn and is not widely accepted. Do you know who John
Hasn't got
Marco
very cool.
Allegro?
Well, I've heard of him, but the funny thing is, he didn't come up with that theory. It's an older theory. He just fucking wrote it and added his own stuff
Yeah,
into
yeah,
it, basically. You know, so that's one reason it costs ridicule. But that's another reason. That's something they don't full tell you. There's always a little need to know basis with history. You know,
mm-hmm.
there's so much suppressed. Like I just discovered Mary the Jewess or Maria the Prophetess, and she was
Mm-hmm.
the first alchemist in history. She's pretty much credited to making up the still that we still use today in our distillery works. And she was a woman, she was a Gnostic, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of her writings mostly been lost. But point is, we don't know fuck all about this woman, and she's influenced a lot of modern history to this day. And she was in the first century.
You
So there's
know,
a lot of history that's kept hush hush, you know?
yeah. So seraphim are celestial or heavenly beings originating in ancient Judaism and are considered the highest rank in Christian angel angelology and the fifth rank of 10 in Jewish angelic hierarchy.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because the Satan or whatever is meant to be the smartest of God's creatures. Well, actually, that's reference to the serpent, which is actually a different being. But some say that serpent was a seraphim in some old folklores or traditions and was cursed with a serpent body to crawl on its belly and shit, which is interesting. But yeah, depending on the type of Judaism, Christianity, etc.
All right. Well, you know what? We talked about, let's go back to the Garden of Eden.
But another thing is with the Garden of Eden, that could be just a symbolism of living in God's commandment too, or you living in heaven. And if you're disobeying God, you could be in hell basically, or cast out of the garden. So symbolic to that as well. Also symbolic that the tree of life is also you as the tree of life, Kabbalah is your tree of life. So it also goes to your ancestors, your family, your level of being, life, death, consciousness, different realms, etc. Also goes into planets, of course, like 12 zodiacs and all that sort of stuff.
So,
Now, one thing I want to mention too, Tyrone, just before I forget, with that person who wrote about Jesus being the magic mushroom, how said the theory is older, the
mm,
difference is between him and this theory was the spirit was inside of the magic mushroom, not the magic mushroom itself. So Christ was inside the magic mushroom. So you took the magic mushroom to contact Christ
right.
or could contact Christ. So that's where that idea comes from. He just sort of turned it into his own sort of usage, his own interpretation.
Oh, oh, okay. Yeah. I've read, and that's what I'm saying. Like when you read any of the ancient translation, like the ancient text from the translations from the ancient text, it's always based on somebody's interpretation.
Yeah,
Always, always,
exactly right.
and that's why it's hard to find what's true and what's not because there's no way it's somebody's personal interpretation. I mean, two people can be standing right next to each other watching a car accident and describing that car accident,
Yes.
totally different. I mean, it's going to have a basic core and foundation of it. It was a red car. Some people would say it was a maroon car, or I don't know,
And that's one of the
different.
reasons why there was never one just head priest. There was a bunch of them. They had the sort of the top one and stuff like that. But they always had a gathering. They sort of come to agreements, but they all had their own sort of interpretations as well. And they'll discuss them together. It wasn't until a little bit later that other people started going on saying, "Oh, my view's right and yours is wrong," when stuff became strictly dogma. When
Right.
early texts were meant to be questioned, even in early Judaism, like they're meant to question the text and because they understood it was being influenced by man and stuff like that, and then that eventually become taboo.
Yeah. So this now I asked it. I said, did Inky give metallurgy to humankind? Because remember, I talked about that before. So it said it couldn't find anything specific about Inky giving metallurgy to humankind.
Hmm.
I'm gonna go get the book real quick, and I'm gonna
No
show you.
worries, no worries at all. Here, my chicken's going off. I think one of them's laying an egg.
So the reason why I'm doing this is because a lot of people are starting to say, "Oh, AI is going to take over. It's just going to keep getting smarter and blah 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 blah." Well, I asked it. I said, "Did Inky give metallurgy to humankind?" I asked so many different questions about it. Okay, actually, it was CBS 1165. So I was wrong. So this is what it says, right? It says the artisan Inky revealed the secret of metallurgy to the woman while his sons, the great messenger observers, cast metal and cohabited with her, the mother of the human race. The mother knows the secret of the gods, the tool revealed. And this is supposed to be uh, related to what's written in the Holy Bible, Genesis 6, 1 through 5, and the book of Enoch, chapter 8 and 1. That's what that is. Now, hold on. Okay, yeah, so it was 83:22. It says, and this is on page 142 of Eden. It says CBS 830 83:22, column 2, the serpent Inky, the serpent Inky, okay,
Hmm.
presents the fruit of the tree to woman. In fact, a tool, a burin, Burin. He lets humanity taste its destiny. He lets him taste luxury and health good, but also the possibility of using tools as weapons of war, evil. That's what I was talking about earlier. And this is supposed to be in relation to um, the Holy Bible, Genesis 3, 1 through 5, where it says the serpent reveals to woman that if she tastes of the fruit of the tree, humanity will have another destiny, that of being able to distinguish between good and evil. And that was the New Standard American Bible. Now I typed that. Now this is what I typed in to chat GBT. I said, let's see. I said Anton Park's accuracy, and it tells, and I talked about that where it says people said his information is good. Then I said Anton Park's forbidden fruit, and it says he suggests the Garden of Eden, the serpent, and the fall of man are presented in a completely new light, and is basically trying to promote his book or whatnot. And then I asked it other theories about the forbidden fruit, and that's when it talked about the apple, the fig, the pomegranate, granite.
Yep. Forget about the
Uh,
propaganda.
yeah, and then I said, did Inky give metallurgy to humankind? And the reason why I asked these type of questions is because I wanted to see how accurate you had to be with the questions. So I said, did Inky give metallurgy to humankind? Right. And it says Enki is the Sumerian god of water knowledge, crafts, and creation. He was later known as Ea
Hmm.
in Akkadian and Babylonian mythology. Enki was considered the keeper of the divine powers, called Me, the gifts of civilization. However, they couldn't find anything, the AI couldn't find anything specifically about Enki giving metallurgy to humankind. So I said that, right?
Yeah. Well, it's
So
interesting about giving them. weapons, well, teach them how to make weapons of war. And one reason is because even the gods were fighting amongst each other. They were jealous of each other's ranks, trying to outcompete each other, trying to gain the most worshippers, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, but this book is crazy because it's supposed to give you an idea of what the Mesopotamians say. I know a lot of people say Sumerians, and it's kind of hard to say just the Sumerians because a lot of the
You had
cuneiform
the
tablets,
Babylonians too,
yeah, the
which had pretty much
Akkadians,
similar.
and yeah, and
Yeah.
everybody else. So it's kind of hard just to say what. Um, I know he mentions Samuel Noah Kramer in his books a lot, so it gives me an idea of where he's getting his information from. So it's pretty accurate. Um, like I said, it's all based on everybody else's interpretation. But guess what?
Hmm.
None of them showed the actual pictographs because when I took a class from Bar Ilan University, Dr. Nili Samet, she said, the Mesopotamian civilization started basically around 3200 BC, and it was because and pictographic script was its first writing system.
Hmm.
And if you know anything about pictographic script, is basically what we use today when we call emojis and stuff like that. So it's basically, you can type in an emoji sentence and you'll have one meaning, and the person that's reading it can have pretty much an idea of what you're saying, but it could be totally different. Like, yeah,
Yes.
left will be left and right will be right. But
Hmm.
then if you want to go to the religious aspect, um, east was actually north to these people because that's where
Yeah.
that's just how
So
it
I'm
was.
glad you said all this because even say that Egyptian hieroglyphs, some whether they're animal pictures meaning letters, sometimes
Mhm.
those pictures can mean two different words.
Right.
You know, and so even ancient Judaism, like two words can mean the one letter, or one sentence, or whatever. So it's interesting how language works and how it's evolved.
Yeah, it's crazy because he gives you um like the Mesopotamian clay tablets. Like uh we was talking about earlier, aliens, right? And if we bring aliens into this idea, uh all you're doing is replacing the word gods,
Yeah.
Elohim, for
And
extraterrestrials.
another thing, you just gave me another remembrance. Thank you so much, Tyrone, for this. Some Gnostics believed that God was an unknowable alien god. No, so I thought you said that because all the texts back then were meant to be taken symbolically. They all had deep
Yeah,
meanings.
it's different
Everything
meanings
did.
symbolically, exactly.
Yeah. Because they meant to be
Ex-
told around campfires, around the community. We've discussed this so many times previously. So those watching need to check out our earlier videos, for sure.
but that's why I say I wanted to understand the actual meaning. You know, when you read the some of the Rig Vedas, you'll hear or the Mahabharata, you'll read about aerial chariots or vimanas and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and you're wondering why are they talking about flying aircrafts in the sky? But then you think in your head, okay, these people spend a lot of time looking in the sky. Their
Yeah.
imaginations are going to run wild.